Hi there, Maggie here from Zoweh Women's, the Deepening community. Tonight we have an around the table conversation that is a Zoom call where once a month we come together as a women's community. And we wanted to share this video because it is such an epic resource. Sherry, Robin, and Dana are sharing with us the guide to extravagant listening. And in this video, you will hear what it takes to listen to our loved ones in a way that helps them feel heard, seen, and known. So take a listen and join us for the around the table conversation.
So Robin, will you share some of what we've been exploring?
Sure. Yeah, I've been looking forward to this. This is near and dear to my heart. And like you said, Sherry, this is something that we've been exploring and learning so much about. And we have collaborated on the guide to extravagant listening. And we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight. You can find it in the journal workbook and in the leader's guide of the journal workbook leader's guide. And there's a link that Maggie's going to post later. But listening well is important. So important. And it's important all the time. It demonstrates presence, curiosity, and honor for another human being. I know for me, when someone looks me in the eyes when I'm sharing and really hears me, it feels kind. Not too long ago, I told Ashley that we had painted the kitchen at our house, and Ashley's our oldest daughter, and she's 29. She asked what color we decided on. And I told her the official name of the gray paint that we used. And I said that my decorator friend had suggested it. And she responded, she said, "Mom, that's the color I suggested to you." And I was like, "Really?" And she said, "Yes, I remember exactly where I was sitting. And I remember where you were standing in the kitchen." And I felt terrible. I hate when I miss things like that feel important to someone else. And I thought, where was I in that? I remember the conversation, but I thought, where did my mind go? Where did my attention go? And how did I miss that? That in and of itself didn't hurt Ashley, but it was discouraging for her. And because she really loved being a part of the process of choosing the paint. But it also bumped into something in her story where I was preoccupied and missed her many, many, many times for many years of her growing up. I missed her voice, her thoughts, her ideas, and that did hurt. So it did feel familiar to her. So listening matters. And I would suggest that listening well is even more important when someone is sharing something that they are feeling deeply. Perhaps it's something that they're going through that's painful for them. Perhaps it's a loss. Whatever it might be, how we hold what they share with us and how we respond matters. Our response could bring deeper pain for them. It could communicate indifference, or it might bring some level of healing for them. So there are a few bullet points I wrote in the listening guide around some of the things that can help us listen well and with beautiful intention. And some of these things are keeping our minds and our hearts open and curious. Those two words I think we use a lot. Open and curious. Another is holding the space for the person who is sharing for that time and giving them our undivided attention, like they're the only ones in the room. Being fully present. When we're fully present and engaged with a person, we communicate, you are important. And so are the things that you are saying. And I hear you. I see you. I care about you and your story, and it matters. You matter. So engaging with them, their whole person, with my whole person, and allowing them to affect me is really important. Like that verse rejoice with those who rejoice, grieve with those who grieve. It's allowing their what they're feeling to impact me. Offering them the dignity of being heard and having their story witnessed, that really matters. So each one of us have different styles of relating. And yet there are ways that we can be with another person that show care, honor, kindness, and compassion in ways that has the potential to bring healing. Henry Nouwen speaks to this withness so brilliantly and beautifully. And I want to share what he says. When we honestly ask ourselves, which person in our lives mean the most to us, we often find that it is those who, instead of giving advice, solutions, or cures, have chosen rather to share our pain and touch our wounds with a warm and tender hand. The friend who can be silent with us in a moment of despair or confusion, who can stay with us in an hour of grief and bereavement, who can tolerate not knowing, not curing, not healing, and face with us the reality of our powerlessness, that is a friend who cares. Yeah, that's huge.
That is huge.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about some of that. But last week I shared with 3 close friends via text that I was feeling the weight of the death of my brother-in-law, as well as some deep fractures within our family. And I said I just didn't have the capacity to join them for dinner that night. And when one friend texted, praying for you. That's nice.
That's good to know.
That's good. Thanks. When another acknowledged what I was going through and texted, this is very weighty and also painful for you. I got tears in my eyes. I started to cry because she named something that I was experiencing. She put words to an emotion that I was feeling, and it helped me feel so seen. It really did bring a level of healing to me. It felt healing to me. How she listened to me in a way that connected to me helped me feel understood and known. Even just that little bit was significant.
Yeah. And there's something powerful about naming. And I know for me, I've been afraid to name that for some reason, thinking it would cause more pain.
Right.
If I say, oh my gosh, that's so painful, I feel like that's the beginning of a downward spiral. And really it's not. It's like you said, it's naming.
It feels kind.
Yeah. It feels a kindness. I see you.
Yeah.
I see you.
Yes. And the more we do that as we're learning this, I think we see that no, it's not unkind. It doesn't make it worse. It actually, it feels, yeah, I can
see
take
me.
it. Right. It actually does the opposite.
Yeah, so it sounds like what you're saying is this extravagant listening. That's all right. That's all right.
I'm listening.
Do you want to say some more?
No.
Okay. You sure you want to say any more about that?
Sure.
All right. So it's a way to know and to be known more deeply. I mean, that's what we're talking about. That's what we're describing. And like you said, what if it actually could bring healing? Yeah. And I mean, all of this seems to underscore its value and its importance. You know, since we were made for relationship, for meaningful connection, for belonging, for community. I want to say obviously, but it's not obvious because we've spent our entire life not in the obviously.
Right.
But the ways that we engage each other in conversation can be the difference between experiencing belonging or experiencing isolation.
Yeah.
I think.
Yes, totally. That's a great point, Sherry. So yeah, how we engage each other matters. I watch you do this, Sherry, as you respond to women and men when they email you, when they reach out to us, and you respond to their emails with such intentionality, and you ask them, how might we pray for you? And when they tell you, you type out in the email a very intentional, heartfelt prayer that I know you're walking with the Spirit of God in that, and asking, what do they need? is what I'm guessing.
Yeah.
And it makes a difference. People say that all the time. That matters. And I think that's a way of listening, even via email, of attuning to them and caring for them and connecting with them, and is beautiful.
Thank you.
My favorite Maya Angelou quote has always been, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Have you heard that quote?
I'm trying to think if I had before you put it in our notes, but I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. And I'm going to take that.
Yeah. Doesn't it just
Yeah.
speak to like even how someone makes us feel, it impacts us bodily. Like it does something to us and it, you know, connects to our brains and it just matters.
Yeah. And it makes me, there's just faces coming to mind where I'm like, you know what? I don't remember what you said, but I remember that it felt good to be with her.
Yes.
So
yes.
I love that.
And that frees me up. Even in this whole thing that we're talking about tonight about listening and extravagant listening, I can feel a little bit of the pressure. Like, am I doing this right? Am I messing things up? Am I helping? Am I harming? But even just to know that we can fall back on just being present and trusting that the presence of God in us is going to be enough.
You know.
Yeah. So I'd like to point out one of my favorite parts of the listening guide, and Maggie's going to post a link to download the leader guide for free. So on page 34 and 35 in the leader's guide, and on page 14 and 15 in the Deepening Journey journal workbook, there's a list of unhelpful responses that can cause someone to shut down, to experience deeper shame, to feel isolated, and to potentially experience more harm. And truly, y'all, many of you have heard me say this or seen it in an email or something. I really thought I was a brilliant listener until I read this list. And this is from the Allender Center Story Sage. And we were learning this in the class that we took together. And I thought, oh my goodness, I do almost every single one of these. And I'm just going to read the first three.
All right. Don't check out if you hear yourself in the following ones.
No.
There's grace, there's grace, there's grace.
The bulldozer offers insight into someone's response or story, but instead of moving with compassion and wisdom, bulldozers go barging into painful territory as if they can just break and enter without being invited. The sharer will likely feel afraid. The advice, I can't see you doing that. The advice giver avoids entering story and instead tends to a person's heart by offering practical advice such as read this book or take this class or you need this podcast. I'm the queen of this one. There's certainly a time and place for offering helpful things, but this can often be a way of sidestepping care. The sharer will likely feel dismissed. The third one is the story diverter / co-opter. And this is another big one. She assumes her own story is the best guide to understanding someone else's and co-opts the time by shifting her attention to her own story as a means of offering help. It leaves the person who is sharing feeling burdened to offer care while also feeling frustrated and abandoned.
Can I pipe in on that, Robin?
Yes, ma'am.
I want to say that, well, okay, probably all three of those I have participated in, but learning to listen, I now see how I have not been a good listener and I'm trying to practice that better. But I also have one particular friend who I spend some time with, and whenever I go to try to share something of my story, I notice now, and I didn't really notice before, she hijacks my story by telling her own story, and it leaves me feeling alone. And it really it's a way that we want to say, we hear you, I hear you, but it takes the attention off of me and onto her. And I would do the same thing in the past, and it really does make you feel lonely and not heard. And it's so interesting
Yes.
to be walking in this way now
Yeah.
and to realize that. So my question is how do you gently love a friend into listening? I guess I give her this listening guide somehow. Happy birthday. But
me go. You say what
Well,
you said.
I just think back to our time at Blowing Rock when Robin said, hold on a minute. This doesn't feel good to me. This doesn't feel kind the way you're moving in this. I don't feel like you're listening. I don't feel heard and seen and known. I feel the conversation shifting to you. And I feel isolated. And that sounds really hard, Dana, to say, but could that be an invitation for her to consider the effect of her way?
that would be a brave thing to do. And actually it would be a
And
kind
you're a
thing to
brave
do.
woman.
What did you say, Dana?
I said it would also be kind to do.
And a sense of advocating for yourself too.
Yeah.
And saying what you need.
Mhm.
And modeling for her what this might look like. So
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Dana.
yes.
That's important.
Yes, very.
Mhm.
So another thing I think we often do is, I know I do this, is wait until the other person finishes sharing so that we can share a helpful response or advice. And when we do this, we aren't being present to them. We're getting ahead of them and we're getting into the future instead of being with them where they are, which is the only place the Spirit of God is, right here, right now. And I don't know about you, I have a radar for that. I can see in someone's face when the wheels are turning, and I can see it in their eyes when they've left me. Like not every time, but I do have a sense, and it's distracting. And I feel like they're gone. They're already thinking about what they're going to say. So it doesn't feel good to me. And it really does feel good to me to be able to say that doesn't feel good to me, even though that feels like conflict to me. And I avoid that like crazy, but it's a place that we're stretching and we're growing. So what does it mean to offer good care to each other? Simply by listening and engaging well. So what if we could listen without interrupting, without judgment or bias or my own agenda, without distractions, turning our cell phone over or turning it off or leaving it somewhere else, without problem solving or trying to fix it, without thinking of what I want to say next, without giving advice or answers, or without saying, well, at least it wasn't that bad.
Right.
That can be so diminishing. Yeah.
And isolating.
Oof,
No kidding.
Yes.
And as you share that list, I can feel something shift in that. And maybe it's my role. Maybe it's what's required of me. That all of a sudden, with all the things that you just mentioned, like maybe I don't have to feel the weight of having to have the answer or having to fix something or having to be able to recommend something, because I've lived a long time in that space. And so I feel a freedom in being able to just sit and be present and just listen and realize that that's the best thing. That's the most important thing that I can bring to my friend who is sharing something and how that changes it. Yeah. So what does that look like for you, Robin?
Yeah, that's really good. I'm glad you said that. And this kind of listening and engaging requires a few things. And the most helpful thing I'm learning how to do is, as I mentioned, how to be present, how to be fully present. And the best way I know how to describe it is being aware of my body. And you may have heard the term embodiment. Being present to my body, being aware of how my body feels in this chair, being aware of my breath, being aware of where I'm holding stress or tension. I hear your deep breath. But and being aware and curious about what I'm feeling and what's coming up for me as you're sharing something with me, to notice and to pay attention. I've never heard that before. I've never thought about that before, just recently. And then also being present to, and it's all connected, being present to the Spirit of God in me, because we are body, soul, spirit. We are integrated, triune beings made in the image of a triune God. And so being present to the Spirit of God is being present to my body. It's all connected. And I find myself breathing in the Spirit of God and praying, taking a deep breath and come, Lord Jesus. And so here's even where the art of the pause comes in, where we're so quick to respond, aren't we? Like we're so quick to, I feel like, okay, as soon as they end, I need to say something. It's my turn. But how helpful it might be to pause and consider, and how kind it might feel to the person to feel like I am paying attention and truly holding and thinking about where they are and where they might be. So we're so quick to respond and react, but what if we slow down and take a deep breath while we're asking the Spirit of God, okay, what does this person need right now in this moment? Just in my breath internally, not out loud. And perhaps they need silence. It's important to be okay with the silence. And if you aren't, perhaps that's something to be curious about. And perhaps it's asking a question that might help take them deeper into what they're feeling and their story. So this can be learned. This can be cultivated by practicing and practicing and practicing. And we practice on each other, and we are guinea pigs. And it can just feel kind to do that together, to be able to say, and then to admit, like, Sherry, I'm really sorry. I just did this to you. And it's just a kindness, right? To feel like I care enough to say this, and we're learning and we're helping each other in this. So, yeah.
And so much of this feels like we don't know what we don't know. I mean, I feel like we just learned it a minute ago. And now we can't unsee it. Because we can't unsee it, we get to continue to move this way, practicing and learning more. And I think I am astonished at the fruit of it. And I hadn't even thought of that until right now. Just because we're moving this way, I feel seen by you and known by you. And I feel like I'm getting to know you more. Because, and Maggie, getting to know you more, Dana, many of you on the call, I'm getting to know you more because we're listening differently. And we're hearing and we're engaging differently. And I realized I was raised making statements after stories instead of asking questions, and how different that is when you move in curiosity. So thank you, Robin, so much for sharing so much of this. It's also very significant, and for inviting us into practicing this more and more. I mean, it really has changed the way I engage with people, inviting me to know each person more. And again, that freedom to listen more deeply, free from having to do anything more but be present. So thank you.
It feels like we talk about knowing and being known, and it truly does feel like this is such a significant way of doing just that, being known and knowing each other.
And so we've touched on just a little tiny bit of what's in the either in the leader guide or the journal workbook, so you can get the whole thing there. And who knows, we'll keep writing about it because it's just significant.
Thank you for joining us for this month's Around the Table conversation. Next month, on November 10th, we get to talk about the tension around the table at holiday tables and how to bring our true selves into those places. Make sure you subscribe and save, like this video, share it with friends. It is a resource we will not want to forget. So we'll see you next month.